The chains were iron. Old iron, black with age, the kind that had been forged for a purpose that did not consider the comfort of the person wearing them. Dahlia Osi had been wearing them for 6 days. Not around her wrists. The wrists had been freed on the second day, when the prison guard noticed the skin beneath was raw enough to warrant concern, not from compassion but from the practical awareness that damaged goods presented poorly. The chains were around her ankles attached to a ring in the stone floor of the cell, allowing her approximately 9 feet of movement in any direction. Enough to reach the water. Enough to reach the bucket. Not enough to reach the door. She had measured the 9 feet on the first night, pacing it the way you paced anything you needed to understand. Methodically. Without panic, because panic was a luxury and she had stopped being able to afford luxuries approximately 6 days ago. 6 days since the border raid. 6 days since the Daska patrol had crossed into Valtieri territory and found, among the wreckage of the outposts they had burned, a single Omega who had been too slow to run, or too stubborn, or too focused on getting the others out the back passage to account for herself in time. She had gotten the others out, 12 wolves, 3 of them children, through the back passage and into the ravine, where the Daska patrol would not follow because the terrain was a problem for mounted wolves and a salvation for people on foot who knew the rocks. She had been the 13th. The passage had closed before she reached it, a Daska wolf in the doorway, iron in his hands, and a specific sound of a choice being made for her. She did not regret the 12. She regretted the 9 feet. The cell was in the lower level of the Valtieri stronghold, which she knew because she had been paying attention during the transport, counting turns, noting the quality of the stone, reading the architecture the way she read everything, with the specific attention of someone who might need the information later. The stronghold was old, the cells were older. The iron in the floor ring had been there for longer than anyone currently alive had been making decisions, and it held her with the indifferent certainty of a thing that did not care what she thought about it. She thought about it anyway. She thought about most things. It was the only resource the 9 feet left her. Chapter 1. The Alpha King of Valtieri was not what she had expected. She had built in 6 days of limited information, a picture of the kind of man who ruled a territory that sent border raids into neighboring packs and took prisoners. The picture was large, cruel, the particular combination of power and indifference that she had encountered in lesser forms throughout her life, and could extrapolate to the scale of a king. Idris Valtieri was large. The rest of the picture required revision. He came to the cells on the 7th day, which she learned afterward was not customary. Kings did not visit their own prisons, as a rule, because visiting implied an investment of attention that the prison's occupants did not merit. He came because the border commander's report had contained a detail that the border commander had not thought significant, but that had apparently registered differently with the king. The detail was, the prisoner had refused to provide any information about the outpost's defenses, its personnel, or the escape route used by the 12 wolves she had evacuated. She had refused, not with silence. Silence was expected and strategically unremarkable. But with conversation, she had talked to her interrogators for 4 hours about the weather, the quality of the cell's stonework, the specific iron composition of her chains, and the interrogator's posture, which she had noted was likely causing him lower back pain, and which she recommended he address before it became chronic. The interrogator had reported this with the specific frustration of a man who had been professionally outmaneuvered by someone in ankle chains. Idris came alone, which was the first revision. He stood at the cell door, not inside, not crowding the space. He was tall in the way that alphas of the old Valtieri line were tall, which was to say considerably, and he had a face that was harder than she expected to read, which was itself information. Faces that were hard to read belonged to people who had learned to manage what they showed, which meant there were things being managed. He looked at her. She looked at him. "You talk to Gregor about his back," he said. "His left shoulder drops when he leans forward," she said. "The compensatory curve in the lumbar spine is noticeable. He'll have pain in the sciatic nerve within a year if he doesn't correct it. You're a healer. I was the outpost's field medic. I'm trained in structural assessment. Bone, muscle, joint. The healing is secondary." She paused. "The primary skill is seeing what's wrong." And Gregor's interrogation posture was what you chose to see. "Gregor's interrogation questions were not things I intended to answer," she said. "His posture was something I could help with. I preferred to be useful." He leaned against the doorframe. She noted the lean. Not casual, not performed. The lean of a man redistributing weight because he intended to stay longer than a quick assessment and wanted to be comfortable while he did it. She filed this. "The 12 wolves you evacuated," he said. 3 of them were children. "Yes, you were the last one out. Someone had to be. You did not make it." "No," she said. "I did not." He looked at the chains, at the 9 feet of radius she had paced on the first night, at the water and the bucket and the cell's stone walls that had been holding people for longer than his family had been ruling this territory. "How long have you been a field medic?" he said. "Since I was 17. 8 years. Where were you trained?" "The Daska border clinics," she said. "Frontier medicine. You treat what comes through the door with what you have available, which is usually not enough." "And the structural assessment." "Self-taught," she said. "I started with the clinic patients and expanded from there. The body tells you what's wrong if you know how to read it." She paused. "I read most things. Bodies, rooms, faces. It's the same skill applied to different materials." She could see him doing something with the information, not filing it the way she filed things, but processing it, running it through whatever framework he used to make decisions. "You read faces," he said. "Yes." She took her time with it, because the question deserved the time, and because she suspected he had asked it to see whether she would answer honestly or strategically, and she had already decided that honestly was her only available currency in this cell. "You're tired," she said. "Not physically, the kind of tired that comes from making decisions that don't have good options. Your jaw is tight on the left side, which is where you hold tension when you're managing something you haven't resolved. You came here alone, which means this visit is not official. You're here because you wanted to see something the report didn't give you." She held his eyes. "And you're surprised. Not by me specifically, by something about the situation that doesn't match the picture you had before you walked down here." He looked at her for a long time. "Yes," he said, "the picture required revision." He left. She listened to his footsteps ascend the stone stairs, and she sat with the 9 feet and the iron and the specific awareness that something had shifted, though she could not yet say what. Chapter 2. The child came on the 9th night. Dahlia had been asleep, or the version of sleep the cell allowed, which was shallow and attentive and ready to fully wake at the first sound that didn't belong to the building's ordinary vocabulary of stone settling and wind moving. She heard a sound that did not belong, and she was upright before the sound had finished. Small footsteps, not a guard. Guards wore boots and moved with the deliberate weight of people carrying weapons. These footsteps were light, barefoot on stone, and they were approaching the cell with a particular quality of movement that belonged to someone who was being quiet on purpose and was not entirely succeeding. A face appeared at the cell door's small window. Small, round, dark eyes that were disproportionately large for the face that held them, giving their owner the appearance of someone who was absorbing approximately 3 times more visual information than necessary. The face studied her through the window with the focused intensity of a child who had found something interesting and intended to examine it thoroughly. Dahlia looked at the child. The child looked at Dahlia. "Are you the prisoner?" the child said. "Yes," Dahlia said. "Why are you in chains?" "Because someone put them on me." The child considered this. "That's not a reason. That's what happened." "You're right," she said. "The reason is that I was at a place your father's soldiers attacked and I didn't leave in time. Because I was making sure other people left first." The child looked at the chains, at the 9 feet, at the stone floor and the water in the bucket. Her expression cycled through something that Dahlia could read, not because the child was transparent, but because children's faces operated on a faster and more honest register than adults. "That's not fair," the child said. "No," Dahlia agreed. "It isn't." "I'm Esme," the child said. "I'm Dahlia. Are you scared?" "Sometimes," Dahlia said. "Are you?" Esme thought about it with the seriousness of someone for whom the question was not rhetorical. "Of the dark," she said. "And the room where the paintings have eyes," Dahlia said. "I know that," Esme said, with the mild offense of someone whose intelligence was being underestimated. "They have painted eyes. Painted eyes are worse because they look at everything at once and they never blink." Dahlia found she could not argue with this logic. "Why are you down here?" she asked. "Does anyone know you're here?" "I wanted to see," Esme said simply. "Papa says there's a prisoner, but he won't tell me about her, and I wanted to see. You should go back to bed." "I don't want to." The specific tone, not defiance, but statement of position. The same quality Dahlia had heard in the interrogation room, the quality of a person who had decided something and was not available for redirection. She heard it in a 4-year-old, and she thought, this is his daughter. The face reader, the decision maker, the person who came alone. Esme sat down on the other side of the cell door, not leaving, simply sitting in her nightclothes on the cold stone floor with the calm determination of someone who had found the thing they were looking for tonight and intended to stay with it. "If you sit on the stone, you'll get cold," Dahlia said. "I know," Esme said. She pulled her knees up. "Tell me about the people you helped escape." So Dahlia told her. Not the raid, not the violence or the fear or the 9 feet. She told her about the 12, about Mika, who was 7 and had carried his baby sister on his back through the passage without being asked. About old Noor, who had a bad hip and moved slowly and had made it through the rocks because the children had held her hands. About the passage itself, narrow and dark, and how the people had gone through it one by one, with nothing but the trust that the person ahead of them was going the right way. Esme listened the way her father listened, completely, with the specific quality of attention that meant she was not just hearing the words, but building something with them. "You were brave," Esme said, when she finished. "I was the medic," Dahlia said. "Brave wasn't relevant. The job was." "The job was brave," Esme said, with the unshakable conviction of a child who had not yet learned that bravery and duty were supposed to be different categories. Dahlia looked at the small face in the window and felt something shift in her chest that she had been holding very still for 9 days. Not hope. She had disciplined herself against hope on the second day, because hope without agency was just pain with a better name. Something smaller than hope. Something closer to recognition. "You should go to bed," she said again. "I'm staying," Esme said, and she put her head against the cell door, and she closed her eyes, and she went to sleep on the stone floor with the casual commitment of a 4-year-old who had decided where she was spending the night. Dahlia looked at the sleeping child through the iron window. She pulled her single blanket from the cot, folded it lengthwise and pushed it through the gap beneath the door until it reached Esme's feet. Esme shifted in her sleep, found the blanket with her hands, pulled it around herself, and settled deeper into the stone. Dahlia sat against her side of the door. She did not sleep. She kept watch, which was what medics did, which was the job regardless of whether there were chains involved. She kept watch until the footsteps came. Chapter 3. Idris found his daughter at 4 in the morning. She knew this because she heard him before she saw him. The footsteps that were not guard's boots, but not the barefoot patter of a child either. The specific stride of a man who was looking for something and whose stride had accelerated past casual into something closer to controlled urgency. He appeared in the corridor. He saw Esme. He stopped. She watched him through the cell window. She watched the controlled urgency resolve into something else. Relief first, then the specific secondary wave of a parent who has found their child safe and is now free to feel how frightened they were. Then he saw the blanket. Dahlia's blanket, pushed through the gap, wrapped around his daughter. He looked at the blanket. He looked at the cell door. He looked at Dahlia, who was sitting against her side of the door in the cold without a blanket, watching him. "She came on her own," Dahlia said, "about 2 hours ago. She sat down and she wouldn't leave. I gave her the blanket because the floor is stone and she was in nightclothes." Esme stirred, opened her eyes, saw her father, and said with the matter-of-fact tone of a child who had not done anything wrong and knew it, "I was visiting Dahlia." Idris looked at Dahlia over his daughter's head. She looked back. She was cold, tired, sitting on stone, and she had given her only blanket to a child she had met 2 hours ago through a window. She did not perform anything about this. She let it be what it was. "Thank you," he said, "for the blanket." He stood in the corridor with his daughter in his arms and the blanket trailing from her small hands, and an expression on his face that she could read, because she could read everything. And what she read was a man running a very fast calculation about the kind of person who gave their only blanket to their captor's child in the middle of the night without being asked. He left with Esme. The blanket stayed. She was not certain whether that was deliberate or not. She pulled it back through the gap and wrapped it around herself and sat in the dark and waited for whatever came next. Chapter 4. What came next was the chains, or rather, the absence of them. She woke in the morning. She had slept, finally, in the gray hour before dawn, to the sound of the cell door opening, and a guard she had not seen before entering with a key that fit the ankle irons. He removed them without comment. He left a tray of food that was not prison food, bread that was fresh rather than stale, a piece of fruit, a cup of something that steamed. He left the cell door open behind him. She sat on the cot and looked at the open door and the absent chains and the food that someone had chosen with the deliberate care of a person making a point. And she understood that the point had been made sometime between 4 in the morning and now, in whatever room Idris Valtieri used for the decisions that didn't have good options. She ate the bread, she ate the fruit, she drank the thing that steamed, which turned out to be a tea she had not tasted before. herbed and complex, the kind of thing that someone prepared with knowledge rather than habit. She did not leave the cell. Not because the door was not open. It was, and the corridor beyond it was empty, and the stairs at the end of the corridor presumably led to the rest of the stronghold. She did not leave because leaving without understanding what the open door meant was a decision she was not willing to make without more information. The information came in the form of Esme, who appeared at the cell door approximately 30 minutes later, fully dressed this time, with a wooden horse in one hand, and the specific energy of a child who had been told to wait, and had waited exactly as long as her patience allowed. "You're not chained," Esme said, looking at her ankles. "No." "Good." She came into the cell without hesitation, sat on the cot beside Dahlia, and presented the wooden horse. "This is Boria. He's mine. You can hold him." Dahlia looked at the horse. It was carved with care, the mane detailed, the proportions accurate. She took it with the gravity it deserved. "Thank you," she said. "Papa took the chains off," Esme said. "I told him they were wrong." "You told him?" "At breakfast. I said Dahlia helped people escape, and then she gave me her blanket, and she's in chains, and that's wrong." She paused. He didn't say anything for a long time. Then he left breakfast. Dahlia held the wooden horse and thought about a 4-year-old at a breakfast table telling the Alpha King that his prisoner's chains were wrong, and about the long silence that followed, and about the kind of silence that contained a decision being made. "Your father," Dahlia said. "Does he listen to you often?" "He listens to everything," Esme said. "He doesn't always do what I say, but he listens. And today he did what you said. Today was a good day," Esme said with the satisfied tone of someone who had won a negotiation and knew it. Chapter 5. Idris came at noon. The cell door was still open. She was sitting on the cot with Esme, who had not left and showed no signs of planning to leave, and who had spent the morning telling Dahlia about Boria's adventures with the comprehensive narrative ambition of a 4-year-old who had a story to tell and an audience willing to hear it. He stood in the doorway. "Esme," he said, "Claudine is looking for you." "I'm busy," Esme said. "Claudine has your drawing supplies." This produced a calculation. Drawing supplies were significant. Dahlia could see the child weighing the merits of her current activity against the drawing supplies, and arriving at a conclusion that was not entirely in favor of leaving, but acknowledged the competitive weight of the alternative. "I'll come back," Esme told Dahlia. "I'll be here," Dahlia said. Esme left with the purposeful stride of a person who was not leaving permanently and intended this to be understood. Idris watched her go. Then he came into the cell. It was the first time he had been inside it. Every previous visit he had stayed at the door, in the corridor, on his side of the threshold. He came in now and the space changed. Not because of his size, though the cell was not designed for a man of his dimensions, but because of what the entering meant. He was crossing into her space rather than addressing her from outside it. He sat on the stone bench across from the cot. The cell was small enough that their knees were not far apart. "The chains are gone," she said. "The border commander made the decision to bring you here. The chains were standard protocol for captured combatants. You are not a combatant. I was at a military outpost. You were a medic at a military outpost," he said. "Who evacuated 12 people, including 3 children, and was captured because you ran out of time?" He looked at the stone floor where the ankle irons had been. "I reviewed the border commander's report on the first day. I should have come down here on the first day." "You came on the 7th, she said. "That's when you came." "It was late," he said. She looked at him. At the jaw that was tight on the left side, the same as the first visit, the tension of a man managing something unresolved. "You're doing it again," she said, holding something on the left. He looked at her. "You read me the first time and you're reading me now." "It's what I do," she said. "I told you. I read everything." "What are you reading now?" "You are a man who sent a border raid into Daska territory that resulted in the capture of a medic who was helping people escape," she said. "You are now sitting in the cell where that medic was chained for 9 days, and you are carrying the specific weight of someone who has to reconcile what his border commanders do in his name with what he would have done himself. The left jaw tension is guilt. It's been there since the 7th day." He was very still. "It was not guilt on the 7th day," she said. "On the 7th day it was surprise. The guilt came after. Sometime between the 7th day and this morning, when your daughter told you at breakfast that the chains were wrong. She said that you helped people and then gave her your blanket and you were in chains, and it was wrong," he said. She said it the way she says everything, as a fact that the world was expected to accommodate. And the world accommodated it. I accommodated it, he said. Because she was right, and I had known she was right since the 7th day and had not acted on it because… He stopped. Because acting on it required acknowledging what the chains meant, she said. And what they meant was that your border protocol treats medics the same as combatants. And you had not thought about that until you were standing in a corridor at 4 a.m, looking at your daughter sleeping against the door of a cell where the prisoner had given away her blanket. He looked at her. Yes, he said, that is accurate. The posture assessment is free, she said. The emotional assessment costs more. Something happened to his face that she had not seen before. Not the management, not the control, but the brief fracture of both. Not a smile. The architecture of where a smile would go if the situation were slightly different. What does it cost? He said. Honesty, she said. The kind that goes both directions. All right, he said. Both directions. Then tell me what you're going to do with me, she said. Not the chains. The chains are gone. The rest of it. Am I a prisoner? Am I a guest? Am I a political complication you are managing? I have been in this cell for 9 days reading stone walls, and I would prefer to read something with more information in it. You are a political complication, he said. The border situation with Daska is unresolved. Releasing you is a concession the council will not authorize without a reciprocal arrangement. Keeping you is… He looked at the cell. No longer something I intend to do in this room. Then where? The East Wing, he said. The rooms are… He paused. They are not a cell. And my status… Guest, he said. Under the specific interpretation that a guest is someone whose presence is voluntary and whose departure is available when the political situation allows. She looked at him. That is a very careful framing. I am a very careful man, he said. When I am not being 7 days late. She held hers. The cell was small and the space between them was smaller, and the reading she was doing of his face was not a thing she could stop doing. Because the face was giving her more information with every passing second, and she was a person who could not leave information unprocessed. What she processed was he was not performing care. He was experiencing it. The specific discomfort on his face was not political management. It was the discomfort of a man who had encountered a situation that offended something in him that was older and more personal than governance. All right, she said. The East Wing. All right, he said. And then, after a pause that had the quality of something being decided, Esme will want to visit. Esme is going to visit regardless of what anyone wants, she said. That child has the strategic determination of a border campaign. The architecture of the smile appeared again. Closer this time. She gets it from her mother, he said. Then, more quietly, who died 3 years ago. And who would have, I think, been down here on the first day, at the man sitting on it who had just told her something he had not planned to tell her, in the specific unguarded way of someone whose defenses had been breached by a combination of his daughter's conviction and a medic's accuracy. I'm sorry, she said, about your wife. Thank you, he said. For what it's worth, she said. Your daughter is the most extraordinary person I have met in this stronghold, and I have been reading people in this stronghold for 9 days. She is, he said. She is exactly what her mother would have wanted her to be. Not speaking. The silence had a different quality than any of the previous silences between them. Less the silence of assessment, and more the silence of two people who had exchanged enough honesty that the space between them had changed composition. The East Wing, she said. I'll have someone show you, he said. He stood. He looked at her once more. Dahlia. She sat in the chainless cell with the open door and the empty teacup, and the specific awareness that the 9 feet had become something else. Not freedom. Not yet, but the beginning of the distance between what had happened and what was going to happen next. Chapter 6. The East Wing was not a cell. This was obvious and also insufficient as a description. The East Wing rooms were warm and windowed, and furnished with the specific care of a space that expected its occupant to be comfortable. And the distance between this and the stone floor and the iron ring was a distance she measured not in feet, but in the particular recalibration required when the terms of your existence changed faster than your understanding of them. She was given clothes. She was given food that continued to arrive with the deliberate care of someone choosing it, which happened because Idris asked what she needed, and she said books, and he said what kind, and she said the kind that tell me what's wrong with people and how to fix it. And 2 days later a shelf appeared in her room with 40 volumes that represented the most comprehensive collection of structural medicine texts in the territory. She read them the way she read everything, comprehensively. She found errors in 3 of the texts and annotated them in the margins because she could not help herself. In the 2nd week, the stronghold's physician sent a patient to her. This was not sanctioned. The physician, a man named Hadu, who had the particular wariness of someone who had been the territory's only trained doctor for 15 years, had heard about the border interrogator's back and had sent, without asking anyone's permission, a stable hand with a shoulder injury that had not responded to his treatment. Dahlia assessed the shoulder. Misaligned scapula, compensatory muscle tension in the trapezius, the kind of thing that presented as a soft tissue problem but originated in the bone's position relative to the joint. She corrected it in 20 minutes. The stable hand left with full range of motion and an expression of startled relief. Hadu sent another patient the next day, and the next. By the 3rd week, she was seeing 4 patients a day, working from the East Wing room that had quietly transformed from a guest room into a clinic. Idris found out in the 3rd week. She expected correction. Instead, he stood in the doorway and watched her work on a kitchen worker's wrist for 3 minutes before he said, "Hadu says you've fixed 6 conditions he had classified as chronic. They were misdiagnosed. The symptoms were treated. The structural cause was not. He also says your margin annotations in the Varanov text identified an error that has been in print for 40 years. The author confused the insertion point of the teres minor with the teres major. The clinical implications are significant." He was quiet for a moment. "You have turned a guest room into a medical practice. I have turned an underused space into a functional clinic. The territory has 1 physician for 800 wolves. The gap between demand and supply is producing exactly the outcomes you would expect. And you are addressing the gap. The gap is a policy question. The patients are a medical question. I am qualified for the 2nd. She looked up. He was looking at her with the expression she had been reading for 3 weeks. The specific combination of reassessment and something else that did not fit neatly into the categories she had built for reading him. "You are remarkable," he said. "I am a medic," she said. "The work is remarkable. I am the person doing it." Chapter 7. The council met in the 5th week to discuss her status. She learned about it from Hadu, who had attended in his capacity as medical authority, and who reported to her afterward with the resigned amusement of a man who had watched a political body attempt to categorize something that did not fit its categories. Lord Morozov argued for repatriation, Hadu said. Lord Sassin argued for continued detention under revised terms. Lady Okafor argued that the entire situation was irregular and required a framework that did not yet exist. And the king. The king listened to all 3 arguments and then asked me how many patients you had treated in 5 weeks. How many have I treated? 47. 23 of them had conditions I had been unable to resolve. The king asked me whether the territory's medical capacity would be meaningfully affected by your departure. What did you say? I said yes, Hadu said. I said it would be significantly affected. I said that in 5 weeks you had done more for the chronic conditions in the stronghold than I had managed in 2 years. He paused. I also said that you were the best structural diagnostician I had encountered in my career, and that if the council sent you away, I would consider it a personal failure of governance. The council's decision arrived the following day. Dahlia Ozai was to be reclassified from prisoner to territorial medical consultant, with full access to the stronghold's facilities and a formal position in the territory's medical structure. She noted the signature, the king's, not the council's. She found Idris that evening in the corridor outside Esme's room, where he spent the hour before the child's bedtime. Medical consultant, she said. It was the classification that fit, he said. It was the classification that let me stay. Yes, he said. It was that too. He looked at her, Dahlia. Yes. I want you to stay, he said, not as a medical consultant. That is the classification. It is not the reason. He held her eyes. The reason is that my daughter has not slept through the night consistently since her mother died, and she has slept through every night since she found you in that cell. The reason is that Hadu has not had a colleague in 15 years, and now he has one. The reason is that I come to this corridor every evening and I find myself hoping you will be in it. She was quiet for a long moment. You chained me, she said, not with anger, with the specific accuracy she applied to everything. Your territory put me in chains for 9 days. My territory did that, he said. I did not stop it quickly enough. No, you didn't. I know. And I will carry that. It will not become smaller with time. It will become the thing I point to when I need to remember what happens when I am 7 days late. At the gilt on the left jaw, the careful management, and underneath both, the thing that had been growing since the night he found his daughter sleeping against a cell door with a prisoner's blanket wrapped around her. I want to stay. she said. Not because of the classification, because your daughter found me through a window and decided I was hers, and I have not been able to undecide that. And because Hadu needs someone and I need the work, and because... She paused. Because you came to a cell on the 7th day and asked me to read your face, and I have not stopped reading it since. And what I read is someone I want to continue reading. His grip was careful, the specific carefulness of a man who was aware that the last time someone's hands had been near hers, they had been putting iron on her wrists. Both directions, he said. Both directions, she agreed. From inside Esme's room. Papa. Dahlia Ash. Boria wants to say goodnight. Epilogue. 6 months from the night a 4-year-old found a prisoner through a cell window. The East Wing clinic had a proper door, a waiting room, and a staff of 3. Hadu had trained 2 apprentices. The chronic care backlog was being addressed systematically. The border situation with Daska had resolved through a medical cooperation agreement that Dahlia had drafted, and that Idris had presented with the directness of a man who had learned from a medic in a cell that accuracy was more effective than strategy. The 12 wolves she had evacuated were safe. She had received a letter from Noor that said simply, "The hip is better." A Valtieri doctor came through. "She had your hands." She kept the letter in the clinic, pinned to the wall beside the window that looked over the courtyard where Esme played every afternoon with Boria and 6 additional carved animals that had accumulated over 6 months. On an evening in late spring, Idris came to the clinic after hours. She was at the desk, reviewing patient records. He sat in the chair across from her. The patient's chair, which she had told him once was not appropriate for a king, and which he continued to sit in because it was the chair that was there. "Esme drew you something," he said. He placed a piece of paper on the desk. It was a drawing, 2 figures, one large and one small, holding hands in front of a building with the word "Klinik" written above an open door. "She drew us," Dahlia said. "She draws what she sees," he said. "The door is open," she said. "You insist on it." He looked at the drawing. "Dahlia." "Yes." "I am in love with you," he said. "I have been in love with you since the 7th day, when you read my face through a cell door and told me exactly what was wrong with me, and I have been 7 days late about everything since. And I do not intend to be late about this." She looked at him. At the face she had been reading for 6 months, more familiar than any text, more complex than any diagnosis. "You are not late," she said. "You are exactly on time. I am asking you to stay. Permanently. Formally. As mine." She thought about the 9 feet, about the iron and the stone, and the morning the chains were gone because a 4-year-old told her father the truth at breakfast. "Esme already knows," he said. She drew the picture. She looked at the drawing, the 2 figures, the held hands, the open door. "Yes," she said. "I'll stay." He reached across the desk and took her hand. She held on the way she held everything that mattered, completely, with the full attention of someone who understood what she was holding and intended to get the holding right. From somewhere in the stronghold, a child's laughter carried through the stone, bright, uninstructed, the sound of a 4-year-old who had decided, 9 nights ago on a cold floor, that the woman on the other side of the door was hers, and who had been right in the way that children were right about the things that mattered. Completely, without hesitation, and before anyone else had the courage to say it out loud. The clinic door was open. It was always open. Some doors, once opened, were not meant to close again.